Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat Live. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, how are you doing on this first non-Buffalo Bills football Friday that we've experienced in quite some time?
I'm doing a little bit better than I thought I would be. I'll be quite honest. The reason I would say that is because as I think I've even said in last year, being that it was the first year we were doing this when we had a after season situation, I do this thing where when a season comes to an end, I essentially cut out sports media in general from my life for whatever period of time. And this happens after a Sabre season. If it was a heartbreaking season, feels like it's been quite a long time. I mean, basically since I was a kid, but uh realistically what it does is it just helps you do like a hard reboot to the system and lets you just kind of cleanse out, catch up on other things you may have missed, things of that nature, where you're not consuming yourself with that day-to-day, week-to-week kind of input of all the, in this case, NFL stuff, what's going on with the Bills, of course, while they're still in it, and everything of that nature. It's like, I don't need to hear anything afterwards. The season's over. Let me cleanse myself a little bit. Let me reboot, refocus, like reset with what's going on. And because of that, I think and it's not even just national media too. It's local media. I just saw Roy's comment come in. It's like, it's all media. It's all forms of it, podcast, everything. And it's, I hate doing that to other content creators out there that I do enjoy. But the reason I do it is just for my own personal reasons. And it really helps me just get back to where I like to be, centered, level minded, everything of that nature. So I'm doing good. I'm doing a lot better than I thought I would, considering where I was emotionally, like everyone else, come Sunday night and going into Monday.
Trey Williams with the Josh comma. Yes, Trey. What would you like to say to me? I'm all ears to my guy, Trey. We see you, Chris. We see you, Sandra. Sandra's one of our most loyal listeners. We appreciate you hanging out. Roy Collins here as always. And we appreciate all of you who are choosing to spend your Friday night with us. We know that is your choice that you make, and it is never lost on us how grateful we are for that. So here's what we have planned tonight. We're 5 days removed from what was really a very disappointing ending to a Bills season. It looked like it could have been the one we've been waiting for our entire lives, but unfortunately it wasn't. And Luke and I were kicking around, what do we want to do with tonight's show? Do we really want to sit there and rehash what went wrong in the Kansas City game? I feel like at this point in time, 5 days later, it's kind of like excessive. Like we've all done that. Luka and I wanted to more so spin it forward while also looking back. We want to reflect on this 2023-2024 season, talk about some of our favorite memories. We're going to hand out some awards tonight. Who's the MVP of the season not named Josh Allen? Who's the most disappointing player? Who's the most improved player? Favorite moment, least favorite moment. We do have some coordinator news to talk about. We're going to give our opinions on whether the Bills should hire a defensive coordinator. There's some names already kicked around for offensive coordinator. We're going to get into all of that tonight. And then we're just going to kind of take the temperature and we want to see what everybody's thinking in chat. How are you doing? And Luka, where I want to start this show off, it's kind of an open-ended question. I'd love to hear some response from chat. How are you going to remember this 2023-2024 Buffalo Bills season? Because there's a segment of fans, and I respect all of them, that are in a Super Bowl or bust mindset. It's either you do or you don't do, and the Bills didn't do. So in that sense, there's a segment of fans that'll view this season as a failure. And I'm not there, but I am just curious when the dust settles, we're still kind of fresh here. How will the 2023-2024 Buffalo Bills season be remembered in your mind?
Overall, in a simple way, it's a disappointment, for sure. I will say it's not one where I'm truly in a, do or bust, boomer bust, Super Bowl bust, whatever you want to call it. I do believe that I am kind of in that mindset, like getting to the Super Bowl or bust is kind of where I'm at with this team. I feel like with what we've seen now in the past 4 seasons, they, you you shouldn't be kind of not in that mindset, but I can understand if you just want to be more realistic or at least look at the positives more than the negatives or whatever. But I just myself look at it for what it is. And it's like this team, as long as they have 17 under center, which is kind of the reason why I hate the whole is the window closed situation. As long as you have 17, you always have the door open kind of deal. The window is open. The opportunity is there. Well, because of that, your expectation is higher. And therefore, just I myself have an expectation of, hey, I realistically would like this team to get to that final game of the NFL season. And unfortunately, this year is yet another year where they did not. That said, I think the funny part about this season, or the thing that kind of makes it a memorable one, unlike the other disappointments of previous years, is one where it was finally a season, even the 2021 season where they went 11-6 didn't quite do the same thing that this season did. And this one just had higher highs and lower lows where it was a true roller coaster of a situation in a season. And on top of it, it was a season where a lot of question about Josh Allen was brought into the equation, which him himself, the Josh Allen experience, quote unquote, is a true high of high, low of lows. So everything kind of matched in that variety where I look at this as the Josh Allen experience season. That's what this season will be remembered as for me because of those peaks and valleys that were experienced throughout the entirety of the season. And it's just one of those ones where overall it's a disappointment. Failure is a little bit of a harsh word, but because it's closer to a failure than a success, I'll call it a failure. But overall, the thing it'll be remembered for by me is just for those peaks and valleys, that Josh Allen experience like season as a whole. And that's what, when it comes to 2-3 years, so on and so forth down the line, when we look at, say at the time when we're looking back at the Josh Allen legacy, this season, if we were to isolate it, would be that true up and down roller coaster. That's how it will be remembered.
I'm going to expand on that in a second. John Robert wants to know, was DeMar Hamlin voted the comeback player of the year? He was not, as far as the NFL comeback player of the year. That'll be voted on Super Bowl weekend. But he was voted the Pro Football Writers Association comeback player of the year. And that usually aligns with what the NFL does. He is in the final 5 with Joe Flacco, Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford, and somebody else I don't remember. But I think Hamlin's probably going. Oh, maybe it was Tua. I think Hamlin obviously has a really good shot. We see Sammy Ray in the house tonight. We see the McChronicle in the house, and that's where I want to pick up as what the McChronicle said. It stinks knowing the Bills couldn't get over the hump, considering the QB injuries, the top teams having down years. But I feel better now. That is such a great point because it does feel like a missed opportunity, Luka. You had Deshaun Watson out of the way. You had Joe Burrow out of the way. You had Justin Herbert out of the way. You had Trevor Lawrence out of the way. Those are 4 of the best quarterbacks we thought coming into this year in the AFC, not even in the playoffs, not to mention Aaron Rodgers going down with an injury, and the Dolphins got bounced in the first round. You start looking around and you're thinking it really is anybody's season in the AFC. One thing I will say to that, though, is I don't think it's unfair to include the Bills in that lump of teams that were having a down year. Don't be distracted by the fact that they ended up being the 2 seed. The path to the 2 seed needed them to win their last game and get some help along the way to get there against a very beaten up Dolphins team. This Bills team was very down. They had some very key injuries. They did have to make a coordinator change midseason. And it was I think, going back and listening to some of our preseason stuff, one of the reasons why I didn't predict the Bills to win the Super Bowl this year was I thought this wasn't as talented of a Bills team as we had in recent years. I expected some of the regression we saw. Now, I didn't pinpoint necessarily the players that will regress, but when you look around and you see that guys like Stephon Diggs, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Von Miller, Tre'Davious White were all approaching those age cliff ages, you could just see where that regression might come into play. And it certainly played out this way. For me, this is going to be a season that will feel like a missed opportunity, but boy, it was a fun ride. Very frustrating early on. I felt like they gave a lot of games away, but I'm not going to look back on this season and say it was an absolute fail. It doesn't feel like 13 seconds. I can't in good consciousness tell you that if the Bills had won last week against the Chiefs, that they were on their way to the Super Bowl. This to me felt like a team that was maybe a class below the Ravens and the Niners, and with how much they struggled on defense against the Chiefs team that hasn't been impressive offensively. And when you saw how bad Rasul Douglas was injured out there, he was not the best version of himself. Terrell Bernard was probably going to come back, certainly would not have been the best version of himself. I think that, the Bills would have had a fighting shot. You'd love for them to win, but I don't think you have to live with, go to sleep at night replaying that game in your head saying that was their chance to win a Super Bowl. It was their chance to move on to the AFC title game. And it didn't work out. Luka, it looks like Trey says, Josh, thanks for piling on Thad against the D-line. Revolt against Eric Washington and promote Babbage. Can't afford to lose him. So what he's talking about was Thad Brown from Rochester pointed out that we glowed about how Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones and the interior defensive linemen had such a great season, but what they didn't do was show up in this game against the Chiefs. And I quote tweeted it and said, my biggest disappointment from this year is the fact that 2 years in a row now, the defensive line entered a playoff matchup where they had the perceived advantage against a mediocre offensive line, albeit the Chiefs on the edges, and they didn't take advantage. For me, my frustration was more so with the edges with Floyd and Rousseau, but I hear everything he said about Oliver and Daquan Jones. So I appreciate you saying that, Trey. Luka, let's hand out one award before we talk about some coordinator stuff. Let's get the mood positive. If Josh Allen is off the table, if Josh Allen can't be your MVP, and feel free to answer in chat. I see Sammy in chat. Sammy, I have forgiven you for forcing me to fumble last week. I do remember that. I am holding that against you because clearly it's not my fault. I would never fumble on my own. I have to hold that against Sammy. You can't answer Josh Allen. Maybe you wouldn't anyway. Who was the Bills MVP from this season, Luka? Who would come away with your MVP award?
Terrell Bernard. Terrell Bernard would be my MVP.
That's a great answer.
Not named Josh Allen. And I think there's a couple options here to be had if we're trying to get the mood positive here. I even have kind of notable others, I will say, listed. So we could even go through just other recognizable names or ones we'd like to recognize for that, potentially that. And one that's eye-popping, but as my number 2. But my number 1's Terrell Bernard because going into the year, we have it documented, Josh. Both you and I were very worried about the world that we would be in if Terrell Bernard got the green dot and became the Mike. And because he only had one game film essentially to show us of what he had potentially going into this year, and it was far from anything good. But somehow, some way, an entire NFL offseason, kind of the tutelage of McDermott. And then even without all of preseason action, he comes in and he really solidified himself in that Mike spot. And he was phenomenal throughout the entire year. And even with a Matt Milano injury, which you could totally understand if there was a drop off in his play, there was none. He was still a dog at that Mike position. He was still essential to how the defense ran itself. And realistically, the defense wouldn't be nearly as good as it was if it wasn't for him. And he is not a Matt Milano first team all pro kind of guy yet, but he went from, I questioned why he was on the roster for a little bit, to he is quintessential to everything we're doing moving forward beside Matt Milano, hopefully at full health moving forward next season. And it is a comfortable place to be, all things considered, from where we were a year ago at this time, looking at the projected roster and even going into the preseason of this past season, where we felt about the linebacker position and what it was. Because anyone out there that projected it, I respect you. And I think that's a great call by you, but I really don't believe anyone expected what inevitably happened with Terrell Bernard going into this year. No one could have predicted just the true rise of play that he had kind of throughout the entire season, especially considering that he didn't have Matt Milano after week 5. That is ridiculous how well he played, even without that All-Pro next to him.
I love the Bernard pick. I'm going to kind of do what we normally do on our post-game show, which I'm not going to say the same person you did. He makes so much sense because of what you thought was going on, particularly in training camp, when it was like, okay, now Tyrell Dodson's going in. Ooh, that's not good. And now they're bringing AJ Klein in. Ooh, that's not good. Can Dorian Williams get a shot? No, he's not ready. Hey, Terrell Bernard's been injured all of training camp. Let's just throw him in there week 1 and see what he can do. And what he could do was fantastic. He looks like a star in the making. And he really solidified the middle of this defense. I fully expect him to have a C on his shirt next year and be a linchpin on this defense. Costa comes in with MVP Spencer Brown. I don't know if he'll be the MVP, Costa, but on an award coming up soon, he is certainly going to get some recognition for me because he came out of nowhere and went from a player that you were very worried about to being a player that you are now worried about. Can you extend him and keep him around long term? Couple guys I'd like to mention here. Obviously, you can't mention Josh Allen. James Cook, I thought, became a very reliable weapon. And I will say down the stretch, when the passing game was struggling to get the ball in the hands of wide receivers, became a very good weapon out of the backfield for this team. Rasul Douglas was only here for a half a year, but holy cow, did did he save this defense in a lot of ways when they were taking on water at the cornerback position, when Tre'Davious White went down and then Kyer Elam would just could not get out of his own way, and the Bills were one injury away from Josh Norman playing meaningful snaps. My answer is going to be the other side of Spencer Brown, though, Luke. It's going to be left tackle Deion Dawkins. He had the best season of his career, and I have some stats on him. He only allowed 2 sacks this season for an offense as pass happy as the Bills. It did become a little more run heavy as the season went on, and he only gave up 22 hurries. And we know Josh Allen likes to hold the ball. Sometimes those pressures and hurries get counted against linemen when they shouldn't have because he's escaping early. Deion Dawkins was certifiably excellent this year. And there was a lot of talk this offseason, not from us. We shot it down pretty quickly that maybe Dawkins is out of shape or he should move to guard. And we were like, no. Don't get it twisted. He had a down year, but he's still a top half of the league tackle. And now he's a top 5 tackle in the league. He's 29 years old. He's going into a contract year. He's absolutely going to get an extension this offseason. As Luka and I go into this offseason, we'll explain to you some of the stuff the Bills have to do to get under the salary cap. One of those is extending Deion Dawkins, where you can reshape the contract and push some of the money down the line. Dawkins is going to be Josh Allen's blindside protector for the foreseeable future, and I am totally okay with that. John Roberts says Khalil Shakir offensive MVP. John Roberts says Tremaine who? And Costa said, my bad, I was thinking unsung heroes. We'll go there next. One of the unsung heroes on the Bills coaching staff, Luka, was Bobby Babich, the linebacker coach. And the Bills decided this season in 2023 to not have a defensive coordinator. Sean McDermott decided to call plays and have the role of defensive coordinator and head coach. What's going on now is a lot of us assume that McDermott is going to name a defensive coordinator. I want to get your opinion on that in a second, but Bobby Babich is a rising star in this league. There are now 3 teams with reported interest in him as being their defensive coordinator: the New York Giants, the Miami Dolphins, and the Green Bay Packers. If you're not as familiar, and that's fine, people don't necessarily have to track the position coaches to be a true fan, but Bobby Babich was the linebacker coach. He gets a lot of credit for Terrell Bernard's growth, Tremaine Edmonds' growth, Matt Milano's growth, and then he was the safeties coach when Poyer and Hyde were really taking off. So you can just see wherever he goes, players tend to play their best. Luka, I guess it's kind of a 2-part question, and I think we both kind of voiced our concerns on McDermott being the defensive coordinator next year. Do you expect McDermott to name a defensive coordinator? And 2, if he does and does from within, would you expect Bobby Babich to be the next man up? I will say other names in consideration would be Eric Washington, who is an assistant head coach on the team and spoke on coordinator day at press conferences when Ken Dorsey / Joe Brady would speak. Eric Washington would come out and speak for the defense. He has experience being a coordinator in Carolina. He's another guy in the mix. And then Al Holcomb's a guy that has experience also. I think it'd be one of those 3. What kind of fear bunker are you living in right now that Bobby Babich could leave?
Fear factor is a strong phrase. I'll put it that way. Just what do I think the expectation of is for Babich? I kind of do see Babich. I don't want to see Babich leave, because the point you brought up is a great one on him. Everything he touches seems to turn to gold. Those kinds of people are the individual. Like, some people just have quote unquote it, and he clearly has it. Like, there are people in all of sports and all the world that somehow just have it, where they just have that touch. They have an understanding of whatever it is they do, and success follows them. He is clearly one of those guys. The unfortunate thing for the Bills is, I think the way McDermott runs things, the way they run their organization, we'll call it, with McDermott and Bean, is loyalty is something they like to kind of lean on a little bit, and you earn your spot. Eric Washington seems to be the next man up in this scenario in my eyes. Whether that's deserving or not, I don't want to get into that too much, but being that it's already felt like that grooming has been there, where if McDermott were to give up, play calling on the defensive side, if he were to give up the coordinator hat, it felt like it would go to Eric Washington. I just don't know. I'd find it very hard to believe that it's kind of felt like that for, let's say, a year plus now. And then all of a sudden, just because Babich is looking great and is a hot name out there, that you're just going to, McDermott and Bean do not seem like the kind of people that are just going to flip it on its head and do that. So what I will say is, if Babbage goes to the Giants, goes to the Packers, and hopefully not to the Dolphins, it will probably be successful for them because I think success follows him. It's just going to be unfortunate for the Bills only because kind of how they've built the structure, the culture, everything that they do. And it would be very out of kind of, I just don't see that fitting the mold of how they've run things for all this time now. And I believe they think what they're doing is successful. And I think that they believe in-house how they run things, how they promote, how they do whatever it is that they do. I just see them doing that. Costa's point that was just brought up, I think, is a very valid one. You know, they do like to utilize scapegoats, but they still like to keep a lot of people in house. I think the promotion of Dorsey to offensive coordinator because he was Allen's guy and Allen really vouched for him. And that's kind of where the Joe Brady conversation is going as well. Now, are they about to do that again? That's that side of stuff. It feels like that's the kind of thing they would like to do. I would say I would really love for them to make sure they make an educated decision more so than just being, you know, hey, we've had this guy in the waiting, let's just give it to him. Make sure they interview, maybe even pull in a couple outside out of house individuals that they like or have had their eyes on and see what it is. Overall, to answer, do I expect McDermott to take off the DC hat? I would like him to. And it seems like comments that he's saying, maybe he felt like it's a lot and hopefully he does. In my eyes, I would like him to, but then overall, where I see it going, I would say the leader in the clubhouse is Eric Washington. I would just like them to make a more educated decision than that one would seem like.
Yeah. I will tell you, I see what Costa is saying about scapegoats 100%. And loyalty, maybe if that's not even the right word, what I would tell you is even if McDermott's not calling plays, he's going to be very involved in the defense. And he wants to make sure that whoever the defensive coordinator is relaying the message in the most McDermott way possible. And that just feels to me like Eric Washington has had the most experience around McDermott. Now, I'd be impressed if they hired Babbage. And I would also say that there's some concern out there, maybe much like Dorsey, where Babbage has never called plays in the NFL on defense before Washington has. It has not gone well, by the way, in Carolina, of course. Al Holcomb also in Carolina, of course, the Carolina connection. But I do think that if you're going to have a first-time play caller as a defensive coordinator, this is a good spot for it because you still have Sean McDermott here. You still have Eric Washington and Al Holcomb here, guys he can lean on, guys that, he's not just, it's not going to be a situation where Ken Dorsey's here and he's the biggest offensive mind in the building. Like Babbage would be insulated with a lot of defensive minds. And this is going to be a tricky year for the Bills as we get into this offseason. There's not going to be that veteran safety net in a lot of these positions we've been used to, particularly maybe safety, that some of these years have given us. Give McDermott one more year, but special teams in DC need addressing. I thought McDermott had a good year calling plays defensively. Where I felt the biggest pain there, Luka, was with some of the game day management that felt like it was becoming too much for him early on as he was trying to juggle both of those roles. So we'll see what happens with the defensive coordinator situation. I'm with you. I do think the Bills will hire a defensive coordinator. Whether that means that person will call plays or not, I don't know. We shall see. Let's talk about the offense. Joe Brady took over, obviously, starting with the New York Jets game midseason. And, by all accounts, did really well. The offense certainly ran the ball better, ran the ball better. And it seems like they obviously won more games. They only lost 2 games when Brady was offensive coordinator, the wild game in Philadelphia and then the playoff game. When you put the metrics out there, the offense didn't necessarily improve under Brady, although when you look at some of the all-22, when you look at some of the play calling synchronization, there seemed to be a better plan under Brady. Brandon Beane spoke earlier this week, and boy, he was talking in future tense about Joe Brady, talking about how he's got to go out and get better weapons for Joe and all this stuff. And Brandon Beane also did say the thing that Luke and I have been telling you all along is Joe Brady came in midseason. You can't install a new offense midseason. You are basically given the menu of plays from the Ken Dorsey offense because that's what they've been working on since the summer training camp. So he had to call plays from that. So you could learn some things about Joe Brady, but now if you give him an entire offseason of install to install his system, and then you look at the bright side of he's now had a half a season to become familiar with some of these guys, Kincaid, Cook, maybe that goes into how he installs his system. You would certainly hope so. I do think there's a definite possibility that his system gets better. But Luka, I know you have a concern. You don't want this to be an open and shut case where it's like, okay, Joe Brady's our guy. We'll do the dance of how, looking outside the building. So we satisfy the Rooney rule and we look like we made a search, but Josh Allen's already vouched for him. He's going to be our guy. You don't want that, right? You want a real earnest search.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to go out and really explore the options that are present for you to fill that OC role. I feel like the Dorsey thing, where it's somewhat unfair to Joe Brady, that should be a lesson learned for McDermott, for Bean, on kind of just, hey, we're going to keep it in house. We're just going to make Allen happy because he vouches for him. Allen should be vouching for him. It's the individual he interacted with the most through meetings, through installing offense, everything like that. Joe Brady was kind of the voice for Dorsey whenever Dorsey isn't around to Allen and the rest of the quarterbacks. That was his job. And I don't hate the idea of Joe Brady. I would be intrigued a little bit by what he could do. It seemed like he had a better understanding of how to actually game plan in some variety of ways. But overall, it's not like he blew us away enough in this half season tryout, we'll call it, that it's like, oh, there's clearly something there that we need to go with. And you should just, there's nothing better out there. There's nothing that has shown you that that is the way to do it. So therefore, you need to then bring in others. Now, there is that whole OC interview going on with Thad Lewis. I almost said Thad Castle. Oh my goodness. Fictional character. Over. Yeah. Anyways, Thad Lewis is coming in for an OC interview. Mm-hmm. I would like to see more interviews happening. I think that would be great to see, just because what that would tell myself and what would probably tell all of us is they truly are trying to look for the best man for their coordinator position. They're not just trying to make Allen happy and or keep someone in house and just, this is the best thing we've seen so far, so let's just go with it and then see what improvements and what changes he can do with a full offseason. One, again, he hasn't shown you enough to really blow you away that something's going to happen there, and therefore there's no better option. And two, you should have already kind of learned your lesson with that thought process and everything like that, that you shouldn't just do. It's kind of like just it's stupidity. It's making the same mistake again. It's doing the same thing over and over. It's dumb to just kind of find yourself back in that same situation, because truly, if they do something like that and you do get another Dorsey situation, it would really make me question if McDermott understand what they need to do in order to find a coordinator at that offensive spot. And then therefore you start to have that bigger conversation, like, do we need to get an offensive minded head coach so that therefore your OC isn't as vitally important to this team's success, because your team's success leans on the shoulders of number 17 on the offense and at the quarterback position. So it's one of those things that I think, if they go in a weird way, the riskiest move that Bean and McDermott could make is by going with Joe Brady, not bringing in anyone else to interview, and just going through the formalities that they need to in order to make that happen. Because if it does not work out, if we get similar results to like the Dorsey situation, where the offense just doesn't feel like it's all there, or it's even kind of being held back at times, a lot of questions are going to be raised about kind of bigger picture, bigger leadership questions moving forward.
And I will tell you, I am okay with Joe Brady getting the job. I'm like you. I want to see an honest search. I want to see a real search. I don't just want to see, hey, we interviewed Thad Lewis because he's a quarterback coach in Tampa Bay. You hate to say it this way. It's the reality of the NFL. You feel gross every time you say it, but it checks the box of the Rooney rule. And now we're going to go ahead and promote Joe Brady. My issue with promoting Joe Brady, and then, we just talked about defense, promoting Bobby Babbitt, promoting Eric Washington. There's only so many times I can believe that the best answer to your problem was already in your building. That's my issue with this whole thing. Oh, Brian Daboll leaves for the Giants. Oh, it's okay. The best answer we have is Ken Dorsey. He's been here. What do you know? Look around the corner. There's the best coordinator for this job. Josh Allen. Here's your new coordinator. Oh, we got to fire Ken Dorsey. Oh, what do you know? Joe Brady's the best guy to bring in. Oh, we have to get rid of Leslie Frazier. 1 year later, it's, what do you know? Sean McDermott's going to call plays. And then Sean McDermott's like, I can't really do this anymore. Oh, what do you know? Eric Washington, Bobby Babbitt. No, like, look under every stone. Let's make an honest attempt here. If after you go through the interview process, you still feel Joe Brady is the guy, and Josh Allen vouching for him is not nothing to me, but I also don't want to just say that's the answer we have to go with because Josh Allen vouched for Ken Dorsey. I still am intrigued by Eric Bieniemy. He's available because Washington does not have a head coach right now. And for whatever reason, Eric Bieniemy is apparently unhireable as a head coach in the NFL. I don't know what the reason is. There's rumors out there that, Benjamin Albright has kind of hinted at the fact that maybe he has some off field stuff that I have no idea what that means. What I will tell you, this treadmill the Bills are on with having a defensive head coach. We saw it with Brian Daboll. You get a good offensive coordinator. He's here for a couple years, has a couple years of success. He's gone. Ken Dorsey, the direct opposite. It's like your quarterback's Josh Allen. Unless you're great, you're gone. Joe Brady, there's two paths for you. Neither one is good for the Bills. In 2 years, you're either not good enough because you have Josh Allen and the offense isn't elite, so you're fired, or your offense is elite because that's the expectation, and you're probably hired somewhere else, and we still have to replace you. Eric Bieniemy, you can't get hired as a head coach. So conceivably, no matter how elite your offense is, like we saw in Kansas City, there's not as much risk of you leaving. That's appealing to me, Luka. Feels dirty to say it that way, but maybe it's kind of a cheat code around this whole spin cycle the Bills are in with every time we have an offensive coordinator we like, he's going to get a head coaching job.
Yeah,
Can I address something real quick, Jim Graham?
Yeah.
I was not bashing the rule. The Rooney rule is a great rule because it's helping folks get opportunities that for whatever reason, the good old boys club of the NFL was not giving them. My issue with Thad Lewis, now you got me wanting to say that it was Thad Castle. My issue is if Thad Lewis is seriously a candidate, or if the Bills are just bringing him in and then they're just going to promote Joe Brady. That's where it kind of gets in your head. But the Rooney rule has worked. Look at this last hiring cycle. We have 4 or 5 minority coaches that have been hired already, or 3 or 4. I've been kind of tuned out, but I know Raheem Morris, but I know I just kicked you a point. Jim Graham, nothing wrong with the rule. My issue is how some teams utilize the rule just to check a box instead of honestly interviewing these guys.
Yeah, it's not the rule itself. It's how it's being seen by some, or utilized by some, or passed by with some. So the Eric Bieniemy thought is not about Eric Bieniemy himself. I think the idea of what you're getting at there is a sound one. If you could find someone that seems to be untouchable as a head coach, I'm all for it. The Eric Bieniemy conversation himself, it's one of those ones where he has done impressive things in his career. He has a lot of great history as a productive offensive coordinator. The thing we saw in Washington this year brings up a little bit of question in me, only because there were some highs of that offense, but there were also some very bad lows. Whether that was his fault or not, I'm not entirely sure. I didn't watch, I will admit, I didn't watch too much Washington Commanders football. I'll be quite honest. The only thing I watched them for was a lot of overs because they had a defense with a lot of holes and they had an offense that liked to throw it around. It was an over betting style team. But overall, it's one of those ones where I wouldn't mind the hire of Eric Bieniemy for the mindset of at least they're really trying something different with somewhat of proven success. That's kind of where my head's with that Eric Bieniemy. If I saw Eric Bieniemy hired because of that, I'd be like, okay, they're really trying to throw something else at this job, at this position that they know has proven to be successful elsewhere. And now they want to see that success here in-house. And I would commend them for that. Whether he's the guy that will do that for them or not, that's a whole nother discussion. I wouldn't hate it. I really, really wouldn't. But if they brought in Eric Bieniemy to interview and stuff like that, that would be just, I would be ecstatic about that because they are at least taking this seriously.
All right, let's give out another award. Let's turn the mood around, Luke. I feel like it just got a little negative. Let's inject some positivity in this chat. Who was the most disappointing player for the Bills this year? I almost feel like we should say, and you can't vote for Von Miller because much like Josh Allen. I mean, do you want to just do that? Because I feel like we would just both go on for Von Miller. And I do feel like because of the off-field situation, which neither one of us really have much to say about because we don't know the details. If it's as serious as it sounds, holy cow, he deserves to go away. But I feel like Von Miller did not get the same benefit of the doubt that Tre'Davious White got 2 years ago coming off of the ACL. Because he came back early, people expected him to hit the ground running. I do think there is at least a path that Von Miller comes back next year. And while he may not be that all pro level, is at least a good enough player that you don't feel like he's a liability out there. But for the sake of this conversation, let's talk about the most disappointing player for the Buffalo Bills this season. And Luka, there's a lot of ways you could take this. I see a lot of Diggs coming up in chat. We had a question about trading Diggs earlier, but Costa with a good one. Kyer Elam, that's another really good one. There's some good candidates here. Who gets your vote, Luka, for the most disappointing Bill of this season?
I think Roy Collins sees my notes. The guy I had underneath Von Miller was Groot, unfortunately. It's really close. I think that next group for me is extremely close. So I don't throw Elam in there only because he's a second-year guy where his first year was already kind of a disaster.
Bad Castle for OC.
Yeah. Well, he's a fictional linebacker, so we'd see how that one goes. He would at least motivate the guys. So overall, though, the reason I go with Groot is because I think the expectations were the highest for Groot when it came to going into the year. I truly think I wasn't alone in hoping that what we've been seeing out of Russo was that he would take another step forward and truly become kind of a 1B, 1A edge, whatever he needed to be in a certain situation, where then you could rotate on the other side and let a Leonard Floyd, flourish, and or an AJ Epinesa and stuff like that. And whereas the person opposite of Groot actually pretty much did have a great year, he just kind of remained exactly the same. And it's one of those ones where now I think it's officially like, I don't think he's played bad. It's just he's not taking that yet another step forward to the point where I'm just disappointed in it because of what his ceiling still feels like it could be. Is it just blooming later and later just because of his age or something else going on? We don't know. But overall, I just think the expectations I had and others had for him going into it, he just didn't come close to that. And therefore, even though he was still, you still start Groot, he's still an all around really solid edge defender for you, but he didn't explode. He didn't really kind of take over games much at all like you would like to see him do now starting in this point of his career. So kind of Rousseau, unfortunately, is the next man up in my disappointing player category, just under Von Miller.
Interesting. He would not have been on my list, but I hear everything you're saying. There's a few guys I'd like to name that aren't going to be it. Some have been named in chat. Kyer Elam, he deserves some conversation here. I mean, second year, can't even get a jersey on game day. That's tough, but he made a play in a playoff game, and I still have hope for him. And I will tell you, one of my lessons I learned this year for myself as somebody who analyzes this stuff is not to give up on players too early, because we saw some growth out of some guys that I had kind of given up on, like a Spencer Brown, like even an Ed Oliver in a lot of ways. I think you can mention Gabe Davis here. There were so many disappearing acts with Gabe Davis this season, and just not the consistent player. But I will tell you, for you to disappoint me, I have to have expectations for you. And I didn't have a ton of expectations for Gabe Davis. I've kind of thought that's who he was. Now, this was an extreme version of who he was. I didn't expect him to pile up the zeros. But I will say that I'm not going to go this way either. And then Stephon Diggs. I had his game log up. He hadn't had a 100-yard game since that Miami game. Oh, no, since the Giants game. It was October. And now, when you look back on the games that Diggs has been on the Bills and they've been eliminated, he has basically disappeared in those games. And I will say, a lot of us have a bad taste in our mouth for how the season ended, the catch that Diggs didn't make against the Chiefs, the visual of Diggs showing up Josh Allen on the sideline against the Bengals and then spending an entire offseason either being cryptic or not talking, leaving Josh Allen to speak about it. Not cool. Not speaking to the media after the game. Not cool. Like, you're a team leader. You dropped the ball, literally. Go speak. But he didn't. But he's not going to get my vote either. But I understand everybody getting early at getting mad at Diggs. Costa brings up another one. Tyler Bass had a down year, had a couple misses in the playoffs. I don't know that having a kicker is where I wanted to go here, but I thought about it. I'm going to go Dawson Knox. And here's why. We spent all offseason, from the day the draft ended until the season started, glowing about this 12 personnel, Luka, about how dangerous the Bills were going to be in 12 personnel. And we just assumed that Dalton Kincaid would hit the ground running as a rookie and would be an impact player. And guess what? We were right. He is an impact player. But the issue is the other tight end did nothing. His longest catch of the year, Luka, let me find this here. His longest catch of the year was 17 yards. I have Deion Dawkins' page up. That's not true. There we go. 17 yards, Dawson Knox. He finished the year with 22 catches and less than 200 yards receiving. He was not a vertical threat. He was not a downfield threat. So now you're telling me that, and then you heard Brandon Beane say, oh, Dawson Knox really improved as a blocker. Great. You're paying him 8 figures a season. I needed Dawson Knox to continue to be a very good, not great, but very good tight end. There was a point in Dawson Knox's career where I was like, okay, he's not Travis Kelce. He's not George Kittle. He's not this new shiny Kyle Pitts that came into the league, but he's kind of in that next tier. Like maybe he could be Dallas Goedert. And those days feel over. It feels like there's already 25 better tight ends in the league than Dawson Knox, including the guy that's on his team. And right now, Dawson Knox just feels in the way. It feels like Dalton Kincaid shined when Dawson Knox was gone. You could get Kincaid and Shakir on the field at the same time. And it feels like as long as Dawson Knox is on this team, he's going to continue to be in the way because you're going to feel obligated to give him his turn and his reps. And you're not always going to be in 12 personnel. So it's going to lead to Kincaid being off the field. I hope Dawson Knox can turn it around. We certainly know about the personal struggles he went through last year with his brother. That is tragic. Hopefully he has a big year next year. Maybe he's motivated. Maybe he was more hurt than he let on. But in 2023, with all the talk about 12 personnel revolutionizing this offense, it was the veteran tight end, the big money tight end that did nothing. So Dawson Knox is going to get my vote. What do you think about that one, Luka?
No, that's a really good one. I had him written down right underneath Gregory Rousseau. I think the Gabe Davis one point is one where it's absolutely a justified, notable one. But realistically, we were already kind of on a half step back with Gabe Davis going into this year, because I think the disappointment of him not elevating as a true number 2 last year kind of left a bad taste going into the season. And this year almost kind of continued what we had seen, if not even got worse, unfortunately. And I'm not even going to put 100% on that him, because when you're getting 0 targets, like, how are you supposed to showcase your abilities if you don't even see the ball? But that conversation aside, even when opportunities came his way, it would still kind of be hit or miss whether he would actually be able to capitalize on them. But Dawson Knox, the trump card is, if you are actually getting in the way of a better player and a borderline star in the offense, that is a problem. So it's one of those ones where if you are truly in the way of something better for this team, and the only reason you're getting played realistically, and you're probably going to still be on this roster, is to justify a contract that you're currently sitting on, that's not a good look. And is that all of Dawson Knox's fault? No, I mean, we decided to pay him, or Brandon Beane decided to pay him that number, so he's going to be the one that has to live with it. But overall, it's one where if you're trying to justify an 8-figure salary by saying, well, his blocking's getting better, it's like, didn't this guy like barely catch a pass in college and was a good blocking tight end going into it? It's like, I don't need to hear how his blocking's getting better. Like the injury thing that you have up, it is what it is. Yes. We're not trying to hate on someone because they got hurt and then they needed, they were less than themselves coming back. But the overall picture, the thing you said that kind of sticks the most is he was best for this team when hurt, because the better option in his position was able to shine and be used fully in Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, and I get where Costa's coming from. Now, Costa's a friend, so I know he's also just busting my chops. But this whole thing about Jonnu Smith, my issue is the 12 personnel was really supposed to stress defenses, and it's like, oh, you want to line up in base. Now, good luck having linebackers cover these tight ends that are too fast for linebackers. Or you want to line up in nickel, that's where we're going to run it down your throat. And I that's where Dawson Knox just never became that mismatch. And hopefully, to I believe it was Marianne's point, hopefully it was the wrist injury that really slowed him down. That's a great point, Marianne. And hopefully next season he has a chance to really expand on that. Do you think Gabe has the capability to have a 1,000-yard season if he actually got the targets? Well, let's both take a stab at that one, Luka. Yeah, I think so. I think in the NFL, targets are everything. So I think if Gabe Davis were to go to a team that didn't have a lot at wide receiver, and maybe not the most impressive wide receiver group, and he warranted 1,000 targets just based on what was around him, yeah, I think he could compile 1,000 yards. My issue with Gabe Davis is he doesn't run the full route tree. He's not efficient with his hands. And intermediate and short, he just does not beat NFL coverage consistently enough to warrant that target share. That's why, to me, he's always going to be better off as a 3 or a 4, as a change of pace weapon in your offense, as opposed to an every down offensive weapon. But no, I do think in the right situation, or maybe in a bad situation, he could be like a 1,000-yard receiver by default. But I don't think, Luka, that Gabe Davis is somebody that if the Bills move on from, which I expect them to do, that they're going to really miss him next year.
No, Gabe Davis is one of those players for the Bills where, whether it's his fault or not, why he's not getting the targets or the opportunities to showcase himself is not the conversation here. It's just there hasn't been enough value in the opportunities he's shown, other than maybe a flash in the pan game or just big games where he has stepped up, that it's like, hey, we can just kind of let him hit the open market and get kind of the same thing we had with Gabe in the draft and do it all over again with a much better wage controlled situation that realistically the Bills need to find themselves in for years to come now, with what they're looking at cap wise and the numbers that are about to hit with Allen's contract, so on and so forth. So it's not an entire Gabe Davis conversation on why they're moving on from him. It's just he hasn't done anything to justify bringing him back, or that he will be able to step up and be a big time player worth the money, as much as it also is, look, you just need to fill the roster spots with draft picks and other things. And you can probably get someone as impactful, if not potentially hit the lottery and get something better in the draft that is at a much less number than what you would have for Gabe Davis as he's hitting the open market this year.
All right, Luka, let's move on to the next one. And I got a little
Ooh.
fancy banner here. Look at me knowing how to do stuff.
Wow.
Let's talk about something positive. There were a lot of cool moments in this season, a lot of disappointing moments in this season. But if I told you to pick one favorite moment from this 2023-2024 Bills season, what stands out in your brain?
So this is I don't know how out of pocket or left field this will be. But this is a question to me, right? This is my answer to this.
Yeah.
And I will say the happiest moment of this Bill season to me actually occurred while I was on a flight heading back to North America on Halloween Day and looking at my phone and reading a text that literally said, the Bills just traded for Rasul Douglas. That is the happiest moment I had this season. One, as an individual fan of Rasul Douglas for years now, as the Cardinals unfortunately let him just walk to the Packers, even though you kind of saw him in flashes in the preseason and stuff, and then they just wouldn't promote him, even though they had the likes of what they had at corner. Man, that was an interesting thing. But then he really shined with the Packers and became this real solid boundary corner for them. And the Bills were in a situation where, as we discussed, you are a Kyer Elam injury away, or any other corner injury away, from Josh Norman playing legitimate minutes, on top of the fact that Kyer Elam himself, if not injured, is another corner playing, and that is not a comfortable place. So you're worried about the Trey situation, which looks like, in my opinion and others' opinions, based on the out, there is probably a serious Trey out contract wise situation we will be discussing down the road. That what are we doing for that number one corner spot? Because as much as I love Christian Benford, I'm not quite there yet on him being a true number one. Well, McDermott and the Bills just all of a sudden going and trading for Rasul Douglas, trading for Rasul Douglas, and kind of showing everyone and all of us that they understood the situation in front of them, and they went and got a guy who perfectly fit what McDermott wants to do on defense, and actually got better at the boundary corner position by doing so for the next few years. It's not just a kind of one season rental situation. That was by far my favorite moment, because not only did it help kind of project the team back into propel the team back into a position to get that 2 seed, but on top of it, they now have legitimate corner depth going into the next years, where the questions were definitely there, even with Trey White, if he didn't get hurt.
I love that pick. Does this look as ridiculous as I feel it does? That I'm drinking.
It looks kind of
ridiculous.
because every once in a while I'm wondering
Yeah.
if you're just drinking like one of those gas station, like, colored flavored drinks, like
Yeah.
just sugar water. But
So
no,
I'm trying to get my water right. Nobody cares about that. But like I came down for the show and I was like, on the show is a great time to just get some water in because my throat's always dry because I'm talking a lot. And I just brought this down. I'm like, I feel like one of those gym bros that like carries around the big old gallon of water just to like show off to the world that I'm drinking water. Like, hey, look at me with my gallon. I don't know why I went with that accent there. Good notes in chat here. I will tell you my favorite moment, and a lot of it was become, and you know what, Ben Drips, that's a great question. We will get to that right next. That's a great question about Leonard Floyd. Um, Favorite moment is not only because of how it made me feel live, but because of some of the subsequent video that came out after. Deontay Hardy's punt return touchdown against Miami week 18. That entire day was a moment. Sweating out the Titans and the Jaguars game because that meant that the Bills had life. And then everything that led up to that, and then knowing that game came down to winning the AFC East, because ultimately the Bills didn't win the Super Bowl, but in your heart of hearts and in your mind, you knew they had to win the AFC East to have a real look at it. This team was just not going to go on the road, to Baltimore and then to Kansas City to get to the Super Bowl if they survived Miami in the wild card round. So, the fact that they couldn't get anything going offensively, Deontay Hardy got them tied up with that return. And then some of the videos that came out after of just like the swarm and the wave of Bills fans cheering for that made it look like a home game. And the fact that it was on Hard Knocks, it was pretty cool. So I'm gonna go with Deontay Hardy. I love your Rasul Douglas pick though, because we actually put that feeler out of trade deadline week. We were like, hey, there's a guy to keep an eye on.
Yep.
Some rumors out there he could be available, and we shall see. Bass has to make that kick, period. I'm with you, Mo Brown. Bill's got to figure out what's going on with Bass. He had a down year, and he had a bad playoff. He is locked in for next year because of his contract, and you just have to hope this isn't something that carries on, because a lot of times you've seen like kickers are great, and they fall off, and they never come back. So hopefully it's not the case for old Tyler Bass. I will tell you, I think the Bills lost that game on third down, though, because even if Bass makes that kick, I feel like Mahomes would have gone down. Let's talk about this Leonard Floyd question before we give out another award, Luka. Do you think the Bills are going to re-sign Leonard Floyd? I would answer that with a no. He had the best season of his career. He had double-digit sacks. Those guys are hard to find. And just looking back on last year, the reason he was available in May is because he was holding out for the most money possible, and the Bills finally met his salary demands. The Bills are not going to be in position to meet anybody's salary demands this offseason. So unless he comes at a discounted rate, I would expect him to leave, and hopefully he can fit into the compensatory pick formula if he signs a big enough deal elsewhere and help the Bills out. I do think there is a chance the Bills sign AJ Epinesa to a long-term deal, but I am so torn on that, Luka. So I'm going to kick this to you. You can kind of talk about both. My fear with Epinesa is you find yourself in another Dawson Knox situation where you invest a good chunk of money. We're not talking Von Miller money. We're talking like NFL starter money, and a guy that has shown some flashes, but not consistent enough to make you think he's a player you want to invest in and have one of those contracts you're looking at next year. Like, man, we're paying Epinesa $9 million, and next year he's going to be $13 million, and I haven't heard his name called in 4 weeks. That makes me nervous. I'm very curious what Epinesa's market is. If it's down in the 4s or the 5s, sign me up. I think he's a good rotational guy. He's a good culture guy. He's a guy they've grown. If he gets paid, and that edge is a position that guys just get paid, I think there's a chance Epinesa prices himself out and they're without Floyd or Epinesa. What do you think, Luka?
Yeah, I think the AJ Epinesa emergence, we'll call it, this season, and I think he did take kind of a sizable step forward in his own individual career development, raises the question on what you truly do with that depth edge situation. You bringing up this Costa comment, I don't know whether he did say that or not. I don't know that myself. If he did, he did. That would be the mindset I would think he's in. Like, he is at a point in his career where he's just going as much as where the money is. He's going to go where he's going to get his bag. He has a Super Bowl in his pocket. I don't know, he's not going to be a Hall of Fame guy. His motivation in my eyes should even be just go capitalize on your career. This is the time of your life when you have the career that you have, where you just need to capitalize as best you can. You're not going to be getting that in Buffalo. Like that is, I even mentioned, we will be talking at length coming up in this offseason, where it's like cap is a serious problem for the Bills. Maybe not as serious as some people out there like to talk it, but overall it is a problem. And a Leonard Floyd is a luxury signing even at this point for the Bills. How they navigate the AJ Epinesa situation will be very interesting. I don't even know what his market value is. I mean, right now on Spot Track, it says 5.6 annual. That feels about right, I guess. And if that's really the number that it would come down to, I guess it makes sense. But overall, I feel like when you hit the open market, especially for an edge, you're going to flirt with a higher number than that. And like you said, do we really want to get caught in a situation where, yes, he's young and he can still improve and stuff, but are we going to see a rotational edge player getting paid 9, 10, 11 million dollars as the years come? And it's like they disappear 2-3 games, because when you're investing that much money while also on a tight cap, it becomes a very difficult thing to do, where then you need to try to find your way out of it more than anything else. So the AJ Epinesa one is a much more fascinating conversation overall with Leonard Floyd in this particular question. No, I would be shocked if Leonard Floyd returns with the Bills. Whether that's the right decision or not on the field wise, I'm not even sure. But overall, money wise, I don't see that working out, just because it doesn't make sense for either side. Like, he would have to take a serious cut from what he could probably get elsewhere out there in the other 31 teams to stay here in Buffalo. And unless he loved it here, which obviously him making a comment about just going where the money is, that is not the case. So overall, no, I don't expect Floyd back.
Edge and draft to save money. They have 10 draft picks. I'm sure they'll draft a defensive lineman or 3. They're down some numbers there. Do you guys think the Madden curse happened to us this season? I don't, Troy. I don't believe in curses, and I think that Josh Allen had one of the best seasons of his career, and he's in the MVP conversation. I don't think the Madden curse happened to the Bills. Costa says, what do you guys think about Isaiah Simmons? He showed up for the G-Men in a few games. I don't know. I mean, as far as a fit for the Bills, I don't think so. I think the Bills are really set at linebacker, honestly. I think it's going to be Milano and Bernard, and then you're going to have Spector and Dorian Williams coming off the bench. Maybe Tyrell Dodson, if they can get him. What's up?
But you move him to safety, a position that he has shown in his athletic career, I'll call it, because I was obviously more in college.
Yeah.
But he has played the safety position, and if McDermott liked him athletically for safety, maybe, but that's still a stretch in my mind. I will
if you like Travis Kelce running wide open in your end zone, let's try Isaiah Simmons at safety.
Yeah.
Speaking of Travis Kelce running wide open in your end zone, Luka, let's talk about now. We're going to end with most improved player. We want to end on a good note, but let's talk about our least favorite moment of the 2023-2024 Bills season. Let me know what your vote is. I am going to personally refrain from mentioning anything from this Chiefs game, because it's so easy to do. There's so many. The Travis Kelce touchdown, the fake punt that was like, what are you doing? And then the way the whole end of the game played out. I'm gonna focus more on the regular season. Luka, what stands out to you as your least favorite moment of the 2023-2024 regular season?
Leaving Highmark Stadium after the Denver game. I mean, it is so easy for me to go there. I mean, I tweeted it out from I don't tweet a lot, just strictly from my personal account. And that was one where I even took the time to go to my personal account and tweet that it legitimately felt like a funeral, and it felt like the death of a team, of whatever was going. It was insane, the vibes and everything. You have 12 men and screw that up, all of that. Like, that game, it's been a long time since we felt a low like that as Bills fans and stuff. That was one where it's so easy for me, just because being in that environment and walking away from the stadium, Josh, even something like the losing to the Rogerless Jets on a punt return touchdown in overtime doesn't quite touch it, because being in the environment, being there for such a momentous occasion, or not actually a dreadful occasion, where you think you won a game, but there's 12 men on the field, and then you lose it. And then it really feels like, because of where you were in that season, that it's over all in one. What? Just a brutal moment.
We have some good votes in chat. I find myself getting more depressed as I am reading some of this. Costa brings up the fake punt. I mean, that's great. Marianne says losing the first game after Aaron Rodgers went down. I mean, as low as you could possibly feel on week 1, Marianne. I thought I put her up there. I'm sorry. That was such a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Another vote for the Denver 12 men. Cole Schaefer said the Eagles game. Ever since Trayvon Diggs making the post, I mean, I hear all of you. Look, there's a couple games that stand out to me that I want to touch on. The Eagles game was a great call out. The one that came up to my mind though, and it was early, the Patriots game in Foxborough, where it felt like the Bills had really snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Like they were playing awful, and then they get the break with the fumble, and then Josh Allen leads them down for a touchdown, a 2-point conversion. And all they have to do is keep Mac Jones from going down and scoring. And Mac Jones has the only 2-minute drill touchdown of his career against the Bills, doing the gritty in the end zone. I don't know why I just tried that with Mike Gesicki in the end zone. That to me was such a low moment. But Luka, there was even a lower moment. London, where first drive of the game just had bad vibes from the beginning. We were worried about the jet lag, the Bills coming off of a massive win against Miami. And then in London, you saw the Bills lose Daquan Jones and Matt Milano for the season. Daquan Jones came back, but at the time it felt like it was for the season. And it just felt like from that moment on, the season was never the same. It just was never the same. The defense was dynamite with those guys on the field. We got just a little tease of Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard playing next to each other. Daquan Jones was playing at an all-pro level. He came back and played pretty well. Got to give him credit for that. But to me, Luka, that London game, losing that game, everything about it felt dirty. I hated the London series after that. I had no desire to watch any of the future London games, even Kansas City, Miami. I watched the end, but I just didn't want to see anything in London, or that was Germany, but like the international series, I didn't want to hear Rich Eisen and Kurt Warner's voice. I was jaded against it. It's not going away. The Bills are not victims in this. That's not what I'm saying. But I was traumatized by their experience in London, Luka.
Yeah, the London game was kind of the pig in the mud game of the season. It was just ugly. There's no reason to be watching this anymore. It just felt wrong. It was the Milano Daquan injuries, as you said, just the bad vibes right out the gate. And it's, I will say, the one thing I didn't like coming out of that game on the Bills side was just the overwhelming discussion about the tackiness of the field, or its sticky feeling, or just the bad conditions they felt like it was. Regardless if it is or not, it's like, I get that that's a polarizing conversation in the landscape of the NFL. And it's obviously one that, should be had in the sense of, I still don't understand how you have other sports that just play on their optimal conditions surface wise. And yet the NFL does have kind of a variance of conditions that you can be playing on. And that's one that I question a lot, to be quite frank. You're a multi-billion-dollar company. You should probably have it a little bit better suited for the players, since, well, they're the reason you get your money. But fans, obviously, too, in that conversation. But the fans don't show up if there's no players on the field as well. That's a whole thing. That's a bigger discussion. But back to the London game, I fully understand that being kind of like the ultimate negative, because what I even look at it as is you're coming off the ultimate highs in that Miami game when it comes to results. You are feeling at your ultimate high of the season. You have just blown out 3 straight teams of 20 plus points. Might have even been 28 plus points. I don't even remember. It was massive margins that you were just dominating teams. And you're going into this London game in a crucial matchup against the Jags, because early on, of course, the Jags are a very good team. And right out the gate, you have a lot of situations going on that are not going your way. And that's really where the trend started, Josh, where we saw just the Bills completely kind of crapping themselves and needing to dig themselves out. And yet it never worked out in the end. And they kind of like shot themselves in the foot 5 times. Therefore, they couldn't stand anymore. And that trend, unfortunately, stuck with them after London. That, yeah, I understand why the bad taste was in your mouth after that point.
And, Sandra brings up a great point of frustration for me before that game even kicked off, is you and I were questioning okay, why are they waiting until Thursday to leave again? Somebody explain this to me, or Friday. That doesn't make sense. But hey,
and as someone that just did that travel, 1000%, why are you doing it? No team should ever handle it that way. I can 1000% from personal experience say that. I can't even imagine playing an NFL game within 48 hours or whatever it was from arriving in the UK. That is insane. Just walking around was difficult within 48 hours.
So, like the analytics department always catches like the grief whenever a 2-point conversion fails. Like, put away your calculators, nerds. Like, what do we say here? Put away your globes and your GPS units, nerds. You thought this was going to work? All right, we got one more to talk about, Luka. A lot of disappointing moments to go through, but let's end on a high note. Let's talk about the Bill, who was the most improved player for the Buffalo Bills in the 2023-2024 season. There's some good options here to choose from. There's even a rookie class we could talk about, but like we don't really know what their baseline was. Who is your most improved player? And we already have some votes coming in.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is one where I see Costa chime back in with Spencer Brown. You just put up Troy Thomas with Shakir. There are definitely a nice group of names. I will say both of those names are in my list, but that's not who I went with. The individual I went with is one that is truly kind of, it's similar to my next best MVP, the not Josh Allen MVP, where someone that coming into the year, I was not confident in them. And they kind of seem like this is going to be a problem if they have to play meaningful minutes. And then the thing happened with Milano that this individual had to step in and play regular minutes week in, week out. And somehow, some way at the will position, he figured it out and he was actually impactful to the point where even it became a running joke, Josh, offline between all of us, where how is this individual a top 5 player in his position group? Because it just doesn't make sense, but he was playing well in his own right. So Tyrell Dodson is getting my most surprising player, my most improved player, strictly because preseason was awful to him. There was 0.0% chance you could put him at the mic. He looked so lost and bad that you can't put this guy in that position. So then it's that bad taste in your mouth where when Milano goes down and he has to play next to Bernard, who's still, as we said, in his first real season of playing minutes, you are very worried about it. And not only did he play well, he played very well in big games. He had great performances that he would stack together that by the time we got to the end of the year, Josh, linebacker was not a position we were concerned about going into the playoffs with a Terrell Bernard and Tyrell Dodson. And telling ourselves that in the preseason, I would legitimately punch myself in the face repeatedly if I said you would be fine in that situation without Matt Milano. So I think that is the one name I have to give in this situation. It is Tyrell Dodson.
I love that pick. I think he gets forgotten pretty easily. He was a guy that if you had told us in August, you'd be looking at Twitter, scouring Twitter before a playoff game against the Chiefs to make sure Tyrell Dodson is going to play. We would have laughed at you, but that's how important he became. There are some good names on the board here. I've seen Shakir in chat. I'm not going with Khalil Shakir, and this isn't a knock on him. I think he's certainly in the conversation. Luka, I have this funny feeling. Now, I think Khalil Shakir is a fun player. I think he's going to be a good player for the Bills going forward, a very useful player. I don't want anybody to misinterpret this. But because he played his best ball in the most recent games, 100 yards against Miami, 2 touchdowns in the playoffs, both of them very memorable, I'm a little worried we're going to like Gabe Davis 4 touchdown passes against Kansas City. We're all offseason. We're like, oh, Khalil Shakir, this offense is going to run through him. He is wide receiver 2. We just need a wide receiver 1, move Diggs down to wide receiver 3. I love what I saw from Khalil Shakir. The growth was great this year. Still only has 611 yards. Took him a little bit to, separate from Hardy and Sherfield, which isn't necessarily his fault. I think everybody should be super excited about him, but I think there's at least part of me that thinks maybe it's a little bit of recency bias because like the body of work for the full season, holy cow, Spencer Brown, from what I thought you were to what you became, I thought you were a liability. I was pounding the drum all offseason, bring in Kelvin Beachum, bring in George Fant, bring in real competition for this guy. He could be the reason why our season doesn't work. And he is one of the main reasons why the season worked. Great job by him. He doesn't get my vote, though. Costa mentioned Ed Oliver. Holy cow. Ed Oliver goes from pretty good player to, I think, playing at an all-pro level. Had the disappearing act against the Chiefs, but they have a very good interior line. Luka, your guy, Christian Benford. My only issue with saying Benford here is I think he was already really good last year. And he just continued it this year. But if you thought maybe Benford was a little shaky last year, either way, 6th round pick to really good starting cornerback. We love Benford. We obviously love Benford on this show. He deserves all the accolades. And then James Cook becoming a Pro Bowl running back. What a season he has had for these Buffalo Bills. But Luka, my answer is going to be who you said for the MVP, Terrell Bernard. Yeah. I mean, holy cow. From a guy who you mentioned started one game last year, and it went so poorly with how he misread the pre-snap eye candy from the Jets. They didn't give him a jersey the rest of the way. They started AJ Klein off the couch, which is becoming a theme I would like to see the Bills stop doing, quite honestly. Instead of Bernard on Thanksgiving, they got into a playoff game against the Bengals, and they were down to Luka and me on defensive line, and they just needed healthy defensive bodies, and Terrell Bernard was a healthy scratch. And in my opinion, he won the starting middle linebacker this job because he went away. And Tyrell Dodson, who had a great year by his standards, and AJ Klein were so bad in the summer that it was like, well, let's just check door number 3. And he came on the field and he never looked back. I'm a big Tremaine Edmonds fan. I've told all of you that I think he was grossly hated by Bills fans here. Terrell Bernard's season here is better than any season Tremaine Edmonds has ever had for the Bills or the Bears. He is a star in this league. He is going to be a foundational player for this team. He's going to be a team captain next year. And my biggest thing that I love about this team moving forward is how much better the pipeline looks with some of the emergence of some of the guys we've talked about. And Terrell Bernard is at the very, very tippy top of that list. I am so, so excited, Luka, to see him and Milano play side by side.
Oh, yeah. In that regard, next season can't come soon enough. And it's going to be fun offseason wise to kind of shift focus completely away from a position that I think both you and I really we were talking about it last offseason, and we both, I feel like we're talking about it where this was going to be an ongoing discussion as years come and go. And just the emergence of a bunch of individuals like Dodson's hitting the open market, and what a time to have the year that he did. Of course, what you said about Terrell Bernard is very justified. He was technically number 1 on my most surprising player list. It's just, I also took him for my next best MVP. So I'm going to do that, treat that award like it's a, offensive player of the year and MVP situation where you don't just give it to the same guy. You got to give it to someone else. But regardless, yeah, the linebacker position group as a whole got a hell of a lot more interesting and a lot safer of a position group going into next year, where if you can somehow get the emergence of Dorian Williams at the trajectory you got similar to a Terrell Bernard this past offseason, next year will be a lot of fun with, being 3 deep essentially at linebacker with people you can really kind of put up there. So, yeah, it's one of those, I don't want to say rare highs of the season, because there were definitely numerous highs to this year, but it's one of the big ones. It's one of the crown jewels of this season was Terrell Bernard and the linebacker situation as a whole really becoming an even better thing than anyone could have even thought of.
I'm with you. And just kind of reliving the season tonight, it was a fun season. It was a productive season. And, you mentioned Tyrell Dodson hitting free agency. The Bills really have 4 guys that I'm just very, very interested to see what their market looks like. 4 guys that are all, to me, the same. All have shown the ability to start, but not necessarily the consistency throughout their career to be an every down starter. You have Tyrell Dodson, AJ Epinesa, Gabe Davis, and Dane Jackson. Very curious, because I think the Bills at the right price would love all of those guys back. But I think that there's a world where all 4 of those guys get overpaid. And, Luke and I share a brain on this. We hope that happens. We love to see guys get their money. That's what it's all about for them. So if those guys leave, all the best to them, and hopefully the Bills can get some comp picks. Well, Luka, we have made it to the end of our show, and that will wrap up season 2 of us on Built in Buffalo. We joined this brand last year, midway through. We've been doing the live show ever since. It's been a blast. Some of you have been hanging with us, like Roy Collins and Costa. You've been here the entire time, and we just can't thank you guys enough for hanging with us here on Friday nights. And then, those of you that also check out our Monday podcasts and all of that, we really appreciate you. Luka, when we started this podcast thing, we're confident in ourselves. We're confident in our ability to talk about this team, but being here, doing a Friday night show, getting to interact with some of these cool people that we get to on a weekly basis. Me doing the halftime show this year was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I got some great feedback on that. You doing Sabres chat, I know that taps into another love of your life that you get to really speak on. I'm not going to speak for you, but you get to kind of vent on them and feel better about it. It's been a really cool ride.
Yeah, this has been a fun year. I mean, it keeps ending a little bit shorter than we wanted to. I mean, I think we can both agree on that one. But overall, yeah, we love what we do, everything like that. Yeah, I figured that hold that L from Manuel was in there. You know, whatever.
Manual. Go
Appreciate you
focus on
for
the
stopping by.
Ravens, Manual.
No, appreciate you stopping by, Manuel. Have a good one. Yeah, it's been a fun year and everything like that. We look forward to everything in the future, but of course, like this is that moment to just say thank you. Thank you for following along. We always appreciate it. I know Josh, who primarily runs our Twitter, which I do peek in from time to time and do my own fair share, but Josh loves the interaction. That's what we do it for. We love having our own conversation. It's a lot more fun doing it in front of the camera, in front of a mic, rather than what we used to do just on Discord chats and stuff like that. But we love then it brings in other people as well. And we kind of, it's this new thing we keep going on right now. We love so much and we can't we can't wait for what's to come. But to wrap up another season of this, season 2, S.2, I have it in all my files. It's a little sad, but we appreciate everyone for kind of following along.
We don't know what the future holds. We appreciate the hell out of all of you. We do know that no matter what the future holds, we will not be hard to find. Bill's Chat Pod on Twitter, also Bill's Chat Podcast on Luka. One final time to everybody in chat, everybody except for Manuel. We get it. Your team won. We get it. We get it, Manuel. Leave. Get it. Get out of here. I'm just kidding, Manuel. Thanks for hanging out tonight. You know, good luck. Good luck against the Ravens. Hopefully you guys can pull that off. I don't even know if I mean that. But hey, one last time, all of you that hang out with us on Friday night, all of you that check out any of our content, or if you just like a tweet on Twitter, that interaction means the world to us. We appreciate you. And, now that we're in the off season, we're going to kind of take up our off season schedule. Luka and I do not plan to be back until after the Super Bowl. We won't be back next weekend, and then we certainly won't be recording on Super Bowl weekend. And then we'll kind of get it. We'll let you know on Twitter what our off-season schedule looks like, where you'll be able to find us and all that. But again, it was important for both of us just here at the end of season 2 on what could be an off-season of transition for us in a lot of ways, to say one last time, thank you. We appreciate you. And until next time, we will see you on Bill's Chat.